Chapter 139 of Chainsaw Man pretty much confirms that all of the hybrid devils from part 1 have actually returned in part 2, which is something that should get you guys very excited, because that means that we'll be getting the return of fan favorite characters like Quan Chi and of course Rize. And just as importantly, at the end of this chapter, it seems like Denji has jumped ship and is fully committing to the Chainsaw Man Church, which means he's probably turning on Yoshida as well. Well, this chapter kicks off pretty much immediately after the last one ends, when Denji is looking at a poster of the Chainsaw Man Church with Asa on the forefront and Chainsaw Man kind of taking a back seat to it, kind of indicating that Asa's popularity is almost overtaking Chainsaw Man in a way. This visibly upsets Denji, but then he's approached by a random guy wearing a hoodie, and it turns out that this guy is actually one of the hybrid devils that we saw in part 1, specifically Sword Man, which I always thought was kind of a cheap ripoff of Katana Man, but I was always a fan of his character design, so it's really great to see him back. And it turned out that Denji had no clue who he was, which makes perfect sense because Denji isn't actually the one that fought Makima and the other hybrid devils, and this actually gets brought up in this chapter, where after claiming that he was Sword Man, the guy assumed that Denji would immediately know who he was, but he points out that, long story short, I wasn't technically the one that fought you guys, so I have no clue who you are. Sword Man seems pretty surprised by this, but the conversation pretty much ends there, and then we skip to the next day at school. It turns out that Sword Man has transferred right into Denji's class, and this is when we get the reveal of his actual name, which is Sugo Mirai or Miri, I'm not exactly sure. First name Sugo though, so that's the important thing. And the girls crushing on him when he gets introduced in class actually bring up a pretty interesting point, because they say that Sugo looks like a mashup of Denji and the student council president Haruka, and after pointing that out, it honestly makes so much sense. Like, I always thought that this guy looked like Denji in a way, just with black hair, because he has that kind of like lazy, nonchalant look, but now throwing Haruka in the mix, it's like a spitting image of exactly what I thought that mashup would look like. So I don't know, I thought that was pretty funny, but moving on. Sugo lets the entire class know right there and then that he's not there to make friends, so just stay away from him. But of course this just makes the girls in the class want him even more, and of course this pisses off Denji, because here comes this guy that tried talking to him the other day that he probably found kind of annoying, and now he's in his class, quote unquote, hogging all the girls that he wants. But we then cut to Denji being a chair as he always is, but this time he's being a chair for his new bodyguard Fumiko. Well, Sugo wants to have a private conversation with Denji, but Fumiko's like, it's alright, I'm from public safety, I already know what's going on here. And he has a little sit down with Denji and essentially tells him that he's coming on behalf of the Chainsaw Man Church with an offer to Denji to join their ranks. And this is when he says something very exciting, which ties back to the top of this video. He says, the weapons walk with the Chainsaw Man Church. Join us, Denji. And of course Denji questions the weapons because he doesn't know what that means. And Sugo goes on to say, we're a community of people like you, people who can turn into devils. Most of the church's top brass are weapons. They're promising you a pretty high position if you join. So essentially what Sugo is revealing here is that the other weapon devils, the other weapon hybrids that we saw back in part 1, have also joined the Chainsaw Man Church. So I'm sure the first thought that many of you had when reading this line is that there is a very good chance that as soon as next chapter, Denji might be reuniting with Rize, technically seeing her for the first time since they kind of separated on the beach, where he offered to run away with her, and obviously she never showed up because Makima stopped her right before she did. Because again, you got to remember that it wasn't Denji that fought the brainwashed Rize with the other hybrids at the end of part 1, it was Pochita, so he hasn't seen her in a very long time. And it just has my head spinning thinking of what the first words they might share as soon as they see each other, because Rize has to remember Denji, and Denji of course remembers her, and they had a ton of unfinished business from part 1, so it's gonna be very interesting to see what their interaction is if Rize is indeed in the Chainsaw Man Church. It's not guaranteed, and honestly I don't think that all of the hybrids from part 1 are going to be in the Chainsaw Man Church, because characters like Quan Chi, I don't really see her aligning herself with the Chainsaw Man Church, considering the type of personality she had in part 1, which was pretty much adopting ignorance is bliss as a complete lifestyle. It doesn't seem like she'd be the type to really get involved with active things like the Chainsaw Man Church. The whole preachy style of it doesn't seem like something that she would fit into. She's always seemed like the type of character that is out doing her own thing and doesn't really respond to authority well. It would be a shame if she doesn't end up being in the Chainsaw Man Church, because she's by far my favorite character out of all the hybrids, but she might have joined as a form of gratitude towards Denji or Chainsaw Man, as it seems that Sugo has, because he points out that his main motivation for joining the Chainsaw Man Church is the fact that he was used like a tool for so long and was finally freed after Makima was killed. So although he's not the type to worship Chainsaw Man, he is grateful to Chainsaw Man each and every day by his own account. He tries to entice Denji to join the Chainsaw Man Church by saying that he's going to be able to spend money on whatever he wants, because right now Sugo can go to the arcade every day and eat steak every single day. And of course that really entices Denji, because all the way back in part 1, Denji specifically mentioned that his dream now is to eat steak every single day, indicating that he wants to live more than a normal life. But things are different now because we pretty much have Yoshida telling him that he can't do anything, he has to live a normal life. And that's what Denji tries to explain to Sugo when he says that eating steak every day sounds fun, but I get to eat things like pot stickers and ice cream every day. And he's essentially trying to say that he's okay with settling because a normal life is what he dreamed of to begin with. And Fumiko actually points out something interesting that I think is a little bit of foreshadowing here, because she points out the fact that Tsuko was pretty much sent to enroll in Denji's class primarily for the reason of recruiting him. So it actually seems like Sugo is being used yet again, but this time for the Chainsaw Man Church, and he's visibly flustered by this and tries to deny it. But it is an interesting point. There is a possibility that these hybrids are being used yet again, because it seems like Fami and possibly the Justice Devil have some evil ulterior motives for starting the church in the first place. Well, Denji rejects his offer and Sugo's like, alright man, whatever. But just before leaving, he also mentions that he didn't come only to recruit Denji. He wanted to be his friend too, because he's the one that killed Makima and freed him. And as he's walking out the door, he says, too bad if you came with me, you could sleep with all the women you want to. And Denji's face after he says this says it all. That pretty much seals the deal. No matter whatever Denji just said, he's about to drop everything and join the Chainsaw Man Church, and that's exactly what happens. As Sugo is walking down the stairs, Denji is suddenly like right there at the end of the stairs waiting for him, and Sugo's like, did you just teleport or something? But Denji just ignores him and says, I've given what you said some thought. And he agrees with Sugo when he talked about being used as a tool by some useless people, because that's the same thing that happened with Denji. He's been used since day one. So he tells Sugo, you're damn right, I was a tool. Chainsaw Man Church, sign me up. So officially confirming that he is now about to join the Chainsaw Man Church, which also means that he's likely going to turn his back on Yoshida and their initial agreement for him to kind of stay in the background and live a normal life. So that's definitely going to introduce a ton of conflict between Denji and Yoshida, and possibly stir up some trouble with Nayuta, because the agreement was pretty much, if you don't live a normal life, if you don't stay in the background like we tell you to, we're going to get rid of Nayuta. So as always, Fujimoto is just stirring the pot with all of these events from chapter to chapter. And also I do have to point out that this is potentially setting up kind of a final battle for part 2, Denji's side versus whatever the prophecy of Nostradamus brings, because if the other weapon hybrids that are at the Chainsaw Man Church share the same feelings that Sugo does, and I'm pretty sure that they do, that they feel grateful to Chainsaw Man to the extent that they'll join an entire church based off of him, it is likely that they would fight on Denji's side against whatever major big bad is at the end of part 2. When initially I feel like a lot of people thought it would be kind of a rehashing of Pochita's initial battle with the 4 horsemen and all the weapon devils that was implied to have happened before Denji met Pochita, and I don't know, that really excites me too. Just to see all of the hybrids including Denji fight side by side against some crazy powerful devils sounds like a pretty epic ending to part 2 to me. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below what you think about characters like Quan Chi and Rize potentially coming back next chapter, and what do you think about this new guy Sugo? Do you think that him and Denji are actually going to become friends or what? Let me know in the comments below. I'm definitely curious to hear your thoughts. That is it for this one though. Have an absolutely wonderful afternoon, night, whatever, and I'll see you guys in the next video.